Hi, everybody. This is Chris. And Al, hey, what time is it, Al?
You know, Chris, it's time for another Readiness Rewired podcast, and I'm more than ready for this one.
Well, that's awesome. But I think this one we're really looking for Mike to connect us with a really special guest and get down to nuts and bolts.
Hey, absolutely. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody. This is a special one because we've brought in some expertise that I bet a lot of people would love to sit down face to face with somebody like this and ask questions. I don't care who you are, whether you're an emergency manager, Joe Blow, private citizen, who cares? You'd probably love to spend some time with somebody like this. This is Mr. Rich Kinney. He comes to us from the National Weather Service office in Davenport, Iowa, one of Iowa, what, Rich, 122 across the country?
That's correct. Yep.
All right. So this is from their station. And Rich is a meteorologist. He is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist, the WCM. And so I'm going to turn it over to Rich there to kind of describe what your role is, what a meteorologist needs to do to learn how to do their craft, and a little bit about your life. Go ahead, man.
Sure. Well, first of all, appreciate the opportunity. This is my first official podcast, so excited about that.
Nice.
This will be a fun time here. So, warning coordination meteorologist at the Weather Service, basically the main liaison between the Weather Service and the public and our partners. The warning coordination aspect of it, making sure our products are fitting the needs and providing the right information for folks, evaluating those products, making changes if necessary, and bringing that back into operations here at the Weather Service. A lot of outreach, spotter talks, tours, school talks, and there's an internal aspect as well, helping keep our staff prepared internally, especially for severe weather. So this is, I've been in the Weather Service now about 25 years. Was an operational meteorologist, worked rotating shifts for about 20 of those years. This is my ideal role. I love getting out there talking to folks and talking with partners, and they still let me on the warning desk every once in a while to issue some warnings, and of course I have to stay involved, just like they do, to be able to fill in. So education wise, originally I got a journalism degree from University of Iowa. I was in radio, news, and sports for a while. Wanted to be the play-by-play voice of the Iowa Hawkeyes. That dream was soon crushed by Mr. Gary Dolphin. No, he's a great announcer, but I made a career switch, went back to school, got a second bachelor's, and then got into the Weather Service eventually. Most of the folks coming into the Weather Service nowadays have a master's degree in meteorology, some even a doctorate. But I live in Eldridge, Iowa, a short drive from the Weather Service office. Met my wife at the University of Iowa, and we have 4 adult children. So that basically sums it up.
Awesome. You do have a voice. You could have been the voice of the Hawkeyes, man. Gary Dolphin is somebody, I don't know, he's from my wife's hometown. He grew up in that area, and she grew up with one of his siblings, I think, in her class. So we run into him every once in a while when we go back to her hometown, because they've got a great restaurant there that we sometimes run into him. But, hey, maybe, Rich, in your retirement, if you ever get into a retirement thing like what we've done, you could be like the voice of the Hawkeyes, or get a fill-in job or something. It'd be awesome.
Well, my speaking of those type of things, my middle boy dabbles in stand-up comedy, and he's out in LA, and he actually inspired Dad to get up there a few times and dabble in that. So kind of fun.
Yeah.
Very difficult, very challenging, very humbling, but yeah, What the
Are
heck?
you
Maybe
guys
I'll do some of that.
crosswalking? Are you crosswalking stand-up comedy in the Iowa Hawkeyes? Now, I'm over
Oh,
here with the Iowa
oh,
State and
wow.
the rest of the state, or actually the state. But anyway, as we move on, hey, Rich, tell me about or clarify the role of NOAA. Like, there's a national atmospheric, whatever it is, and then there's
Ocean.
National Weather Service. How are those related?
Sure. Well, as you can imagine, quite a federal bureaucracy. Starts with the Department of Commerce, then down to NOAA, National Associ- um, Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and then the Weather Service, a part of NOAA. So many folks familiar with NOAA, the NOAA logo, NOAA Weather Radio, and that type of thing. But the Weather Service, a relatively small agency. You mentioned about 122 forecast offices throughout the country. We have national centers. I'm sure folks are going to be hearing about the National Hurricane Center
Real soon.
with, yep, yep. So, Storm Prediction Center, those type of things. So, a great organization.
Awesome. And again, at a high level, everything's not done locally, like you were talking about. I think Oklahoma has some real firepower to deal with predictions for for the tornadoes, and then I'm not sure where things are oriented for the hurricane operations, but things then are you utilize those tools, the raw data, and then give the local applications. Is that kind of how it works?
Yes, we rely on many different things. Sophisticated satellite information, a sophisticated radar that is, it's gotten a lot better over the years, allowed us to identify weaker tornadoes and other types of features that can help keep folks safe. Storm Prediction Center, the Weather Prediction Center. So you've got your severe weather component and then your cold season aspect. We work closely with those folks. They work on a broader nationwide scale with more of the big picture than each individual weather forecast office. They hone in on their area. So, Chris, you mentioned Des Moines. I worked at that office previous in my career, located there in Johnston, north of Des Moines. 51 counties, a pretty big area of responsibility. Here in the Quad Cities, we have 36 counties. So basically, eastern Iowa, northwest Illinois, and then 2 counties in far northeast Missouri. So we take a lot of that computer model information, guidance, satellite, radar observations, and hone in on our 36 county area of responsibility.
Hey,
Something that always
go ahead,
intrigued me
Mike.
too. You guys do actual scientific direct measurement, don't you? Like, isn't there balloon launching and things like that that come right out of your office as well?
Yes, there is, Mike. We are an upper air site. They're spaced a little bit more widely than the actual forecast offices. So Des Moines, for example, is not an upper air site.
Oh,
Central Illinois is an upper air site. We launch balloons typically twice a day this time of year, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. And we do special releases as well. We've done special releases for landfalling hurricanes, special releases just prior to severe weather outbreaks. And basically, when I first got into the Weather Service, it was labor intensive, a lot of manual type of stuff. Now it's a little tiny instrument package, attach a string to it, fill a balloon with hydrogen, attach a parachute. It goes up into the air about 100,000 feet. GPS automatically tracks it, and it gives us all sorts of great information, which comes right back to our station and then goes out and is ingested into all sorts of computer model output.
so that package
And then
that
do you recover
send
those?
up, yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Recovery. You
Oh,
do
yeah, go ahead.
Roughly 30% of those are recovered. There's actually websites where you can track the location. People find those. We used to try to refurbish them, but they've gotten so inexpensive that it's really not worth the effort. It's not cost effective. But back in the day, it was more like a big shoebox with all sorts of instruments. So as you can imagine, technology has progressed quite a bit over the years. So much easier now. A lot of things are automated, and it helps us to concentrate on what's more important, specific forecast messages, rather than just the general typewritten forecast from years ago, which is what we used to spend much of our time doing. Now it's a much more targeted message. And the buzzword I'm sure you're all familiar with, DSS, or Decision Support Services. That's kind of one of our big missions right now, is really uh, helping out all sorts of different sectors and core partners with more specific, relevant information that helps you folks make decisions. For example, big example, the healthcare sector, health facilities. You have your own specific challenges and needs in terms of making decisions based on weather.
And people who, are involved, like we were involved at the hospitals and things, we understand that watch, warning, advisory. But Rich, can you go back to the basics? Because a lot of people listening might say, gosh, that watch term, that warning term, that advisory term, that still confuses me. What's going on, and which one should I really be more concerned with? Because people do get them confused.
That's a good point, Al. Essentially, a watch means environment is ripe for those particular weather phenomenon, whether it's a winter storm or tornadoes, severe thunderstorms. So people need to take preparations. Nothing is imminent, but be prepared. Review your safety plan and know where you're going to go to take adequate shelter, or maybe getting a kit, a winter survival kit, ready for the trunk of your car, for example. Then, when we talk an advisory, it's significant weather that people certainly need to know about. It tends to be less severe, not as much of a life-threatening type of hazard. So maybe we're expecting a few inches of light, fluffy snow. You can still travel, of course, slowing down and taking precautions, but it's not going to be a showstopper. Then we get to the warning phase, where this is the most impactful, severe weather, which is imminent or actually ongoing at the time. So that's not saying, be prepared for something significant. It's imminent or ongoing, so you need to take action now.
One of the things that just recently popped up on social media that I follow, there was that tornado outbreak that's been, about 2 months ago or so. I can't remember the exact timing of it, but it came through Iowa and headed down into central Illinois. I'm originally from central Illinois. In our small county of Marshall County, there was an EF1 that hit on the outskirts of a small town that took out a small trailer court. And I started looking at the social media posts from the folks in that area, and it's like, well, we didn't hear the sirens, we didn't do this, we didn't do that, we didn't know it was coming. And so I jumped on and I said, hey, you guys, let me make something very clear, okay? And I hope you can kind of guide everybody here on this one. What the meaning of the sirens are meant to warn, what sirens are for and what they're not for, and what people really should have indoors or other options in trying to, learn the greatest important information. So could you kind of touch on that for us?
Absolutely, Mike. Basically, the sirens are outdoor warning sirens. So, as the name implies, warning you, giving you a heads up when you're outside. Maybe it's you got a softball game. There's an outdoor warning siren in your neighborhood. It goes off, and that's your signal to head inside and get yourself quickly informed on what's going on in the weather. It might be a tornado warning. You may have to act quickly. Get into your basement shelter, for example. So that's just an initial heads up, again, designed for folks that are outdoors. It's many people, of course, can hear the sirens in their homes, but you won't always
Hmm.
hear the sirens. You cannot rely on that when you're indoors. Now, it's sometimes the outdoor warning system gets an oversized level of importance assigned to it. I think it has its role, but it's only one of the big warning mechanisms. We have NOAA weather radio. We have great internet sources. We have apps on our phones. We have wireless emergency alerts on our cell phones. We have great TV meteorologists. So uh, the important thing to remember: have redundant sources of information. The derecho in 2020, which impacted much of our area, of course, really taught us that there is no one fail-safe source
Hmm.
of warning information in when you really get into the extreme category of weather. We had TV stations knocked off the air, weather radio stations knocked off the air, cell phone service lost. Some of the communication, and I know, Mike, you can comment on this. In terms of backup, amateur radio actually played a big role. Ham radio was one of the ways that folks could communicate using backup power that may not be have been impacted like other sources.
Absolutely.
So, the other thing I think to circle back to here is that you're providing information through maybe a plethora of platforms, but you're not operating the local sirens and the warnings. That's either controlled by the app that somebody is using or the municipality. So if they're not hearing something or they have issues about that, that's generally not the Weather Service's fault.
Mm-mm.
But going back to your decision support stuff, how does a healthcare institution latch on to something like that? And I know they get pushed out pretty regularly to county emergency managers, but say I'm a long-term care facility, or I'm a hospital and hospital emergency manager, and I'd like to be able to get something like that when it comes out. How do they usually latch onto that?
Sure. Well, we basically it's through consistent and persistent outreach over a number of years, and kind of word of mouth advertising too. Quite frankly, folks and their peers saying, "Oh, you got this nice briefing. How can I become a part of that?" We've seen a dramatic increase in the number of partners that are in the loop, especially over the last 5 years or so. But um, if you're talking a larger hospital, obviously they may have their own emergency manager. A smaller healthcare facility may have a person wearing a number of hats, but likely have somebody serving in that emergency management capacity, and they're eligible to be on our distribution list for our briefing slides. They're eligible to sit in on our briefing webinars and even have access to our internal NWS chat software, which provides
Absolutely.
even more real-time information. So a lot of different ways, and we're always trying to increase this. We've increased outreach to schools. We've made contact with every single school district in our 36 counties, and we have most of them on board and in the loop in terms of briefings. So we're picking up steam as the years goes on. We still have a ways to go. Outreach never ends. Education never ends. Sometimes it can get frustrating, but you just keep kind of working away at it year by year.
And
I can
is there a
personally
way
attest.
that? Yep, go ahead, Mike.
I can personally attest to the efforts you guys have done in the past. I remember when I first got engaged with you folks, may have been just a little bit after I started into healthcare emergency management, and you invited the local emergency managers, which included healthcare, over to a workshop that you did on site there at your office. And I jumped at that opportunity. That was awesome because we got a tour of the office. We got to see what you guys do on a daily basis and hear directly from a number of you on how all this works and how you guys can support our mission. And so for the hospital or the healthcare emergency manager, that is an absolutely critical relationship to have, because we're faced oftentimes with that critical decision of, do we move patients? Do patients need to be moved out of their rooms into a hallway to a safer environment, for example? That isn't always workable. That isn't always the case, but that's some of the decision support that just absolutely critical. And I bet Al can chime in on decision support for mass gatherings and crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'll come back to that in a second, because for what you guys are talking about, for those emergency managers that are probably, hopefully, listening to the podcast, how do they reach out to is there an easy way to reach out to the National Weather Service or their local area to get in that group and get those announcements? Because we hear that, but people go, gosh, I don't know how to do it. And so they don't act, and waiting for National Weather Service, someone like you, to reach out to them, can be a long time. So what do you say? How do you help them, Rich?
Sure. Well, you can, of course, just call our regular public office number during weekdays. But really, honestly, getting a hold of me, rich.kinney, Kinney, @noaa.gov.
Okay.
And we can get them in the loop and get them set up. If it's a newer emergency manager, we have folks out to the office for orientation sessions and really give them the lay of the land. But basically, give us a call, drop me an email, and we will get to work right away.
And what if they're outside of our area? Because Rich, you and I are in the same area. We interact a lot, and which was where Mike was going with we interact every year on our Bix 7 run and watch the weather very closely, because we have 16,000 runners. And then we have, tons more people watching the race. And so the Weather Service really helps us out there. But for those emergency managers that might be outside of your area, how do they reach out?
Sure. Well, basically, contact the Weather Service office in your area. Each office has a general public access number during weekdays, and anybody who answers the phone will be able to direct you to the right person. So there's a counterpart to me in all the offices, whether it's the La Crosse area in Northeast Iowa, or Des Moines, or Sioux Falls in the Northwest, Omaha in the Southwest. So we have 5 offices serving the state of Iowa, and there's a counterpart to me at each of those offices, as I mentioned, that can be that focal point and that person that can really help you get in the loop. That's one of our core responsibilities, is identifying new partners, bringing them into the loop, and helping them educate them and help them plan if necessary.
So the thought occurred to me in terms of this process that it sounds like a good idea for coalitions, communities to get together and host the National Weather Service either virtually or in person, and talk about ways. Some of them that are long-term users can talk about their strategies and some of the tools they use, because you guys have a ton of, your hydrological data for floods and anticipating road closures. You mentioned the schools. So emergency managers, our facilities are impacted by the schools because of, obviously, parents have to keep track of their kids if kids get out of school early, and workers have to come to and from work and so on. This really sounds like something strategic that if you do a workshop, it can count as an exercise, and you guys could throw out a few scenarios and show where they can find some of this stuff. And I think that everybody can, rather than find out individually and singularly, work together and come up with some great products. I think one of your initiatives, Rich, is to work with those vulnerable populations, and that's a priority for public health. that's clearly a concern for long-term care and assisted living facilities. And so hosting, this is great that we can present you as a, as a kind of a one-off. But I mean, I don't think we want everybody flood you with the calls to do that necessarily. You
Yeah,
guys' thoughts, Mike?
Well,
Does the university do anything like that? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think your idea about more on the outreach work, a shotgun approach versus individual certainly would make better use of Rich's time and his counterparts' time. Each of the Iowa, or state coalitions, healthcare coalitions, preparedness areas ought to bring in their
Yep.
local office and have these sorts of things occur. Now I know that emergency managers do that at the county level, especially when they do like Rich mentioned, spotter training. That's usually done on several times in a given region, and somebody at a local, emergency management agency usually hosts something like that. But I think having the healthcare coalitions really take a more active role in seeking out the National Weather Service representatives and bring them into a meeting that, you got 15 counties covered in one swoop of healthcare individuals, and really get that interaction going and get that relationship going. Because I'll tell you what, this guy right here should be every emergency manager's hot button on their phone or whatever, given the volatility of the weather we've been experiencing.
and in terms of the outreach and the exercises, that is that is critical. We have to engage our partners and know our partners well ahead of any event. You need to know that person on the other end of the phone, that familiar voice, which we've established a lot of that over the years, and our job is never done. One of the things that we're increasingly doing is we're participating in exercises. Maybe it's hosted by an emergency manager, but you have the Red Cross there, you have the health sector there, you have public works, you have city officials all represented at this exercise, and we can create weather scenarios. I just did one for the city of Independence. They wanted to kind of model and have a tabletop exercise on how they would respond to a very significant violent tornado. So I created some materials that could kind of simulate the scenario, and then they would have to respond and kind of figure out how they would respond to a tragedy like that. So our work is never done, but through attending workshops and outreach at these big groups and EM meetings, we can get in touch with a whole lot of people. It's that's one of the most satisfying parts of my job is just getting out there, meeting new people and people that have the same mission mindset that we do at the Weather Service. My admiration for the emergency management community is very high. I know what work you all put in behind the scenes. We deal with the weather. That's our area of expertise. You deal with hazmat, COVID, you know, on and on, umpteen different scenarios, and it seems like things are getting added all the time. So, it's an admirable profession. And, one thing here that I will mention, our average tornado warning lead time is a little over 10 minutes. I'd like to think we're a pretty good office in terms of issuing warnings. I think we provide good service. Over time, we're detecting tornadoes, smaller circulations, and thus our lead time has actually gone down, because now we're able to get out warnings maybe a few minutes ahead of some of these circulations. But the point I'm trying to make is that 10 minutes may not be enough time for you at your healthcare facility. there are things we have to do to give you maybe a half an hour, a 1 hour, a 2 hour look ahead, so so that you can have a fighting chance to implement your plan in a timely fashion. It's not just about minutes. We know that the healthcare sector has some unique challenges. That's kind of one of the things that we're trying to address with our NWS chat, which is now through the Slack platform,
Fantastic.
providing those regular briefings and helping to fill that gap, because that can be a gap between the issuance of the watch and then the warning. There's a gap there that we need to fill in the information.
I'll give you an example of how we did exactly what you just said, Rich. So let's say the conditions were starting to percolate in the area and there could be severe weather, and maybe you're telling us that early in the morning and it looks like more of a late afternoon, evening thing. So immediately what I was doing is I was gathering your information, and especially if you guys hold one of your briefings or you send out a briefing notice, then what I would do is I would copy that and then put all that information into a broadcast that I sent throughout our leadership, throughout our whole institution. We got 15,000 people, almost 900 patients. We got to let people know early that this could be a possible issue today, just like what you said, because 10 minutes is not going to be enough for us to do what we need to do. So I started letting people know as soon as your early packages and your early data sharing begins, I tried to get it out immediately. And then I started watching your chat product, and people were I start to watch how you interact with the meteorologists in the TV stations and how everybody's starting to talk back and forth, and just being able to bird dog all that and watch it unfold was fantastic, right? And then I can throw the other piece into it, which we should talk about here a little bit later, is the Weather Spotter Network, which then starts to give us a little bit of a hint of what might be happening to the west of us and might be coming our way. But I can't emphasize enough that those products you produce, if the emergency manager in that healthcare institution acts upon that data and gives everybody an alert as many hours as they can ahead of time that something could happen, then they can start making preparations. For example, if you're under a watch, nurses should be going from bed to bed, room to room, and getting ready to think about moving that patient if that's what your protocol says. Put their shoes up on the bed. Make sure there's portable oxygen tanks available. We made our staff remove stuff out of the hallways, because those hallways become projectile producers when wind can push through. So, just those kind of early preparations as quickly as we can, as soon as we can, makes it when that actual warning hits is a big deal. And then if you have that great relationship with your meteorologist and it looks like you're under a warning, are you really being threatened? How many times did I ever get a hold of you guys and say, hey, Rich, is this thing going to come within 10 miles of this place? Do you think our county's under a warning? Sirens are going off, staff are freaking out, but in reality, what's it look like? And that helped me make decisions where, oh yeah, this thing's not going to get anywhere near you guys, but it's in your county. Okay, well, we're not going to move patients then, because that's a risk in and of itself. So that kind of service was just absolutely key.
Well, and the important thing there, I was going to say, the important thing there is, Chris and Mike and I realize that there's a lot of newer emergency management, emergency preparedness people out there that, they read the policy, but they don't really put all the pieces together. And what Mike just described, what he was doing, can help those listening to the podcast think through a little bit more and say, oh, I don't have to wait, because Mike and Chris and I were just down in Peoria at a conference, and we talked with one of our buddies from down in Texas. Well, they have hurricanes down there. Well, the hurricanes, you'll get 2-3 days notice. A tornado, you don't have that luxury. So you have to condense all that information. And as Mike was saying, kind of be prepared and be ready and be aware of what's going on in a quicker fashion, and not wait until the last second and think that everything's going to come together. So for those newer emergency management people, emergency preparedness people out there, it's good information to help them come up to speed a little quicker. And the National Weather Service and the processes Mike just talked about are perfect for that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would just add briefly too that in addition to the focus on the facility, you can really talk about the tornado warning and watch responsibilities, but most of us have staff that travel from surrounding counties and areas that may be impacted, and they may have a warning and we may have nothing. So it's making sure that your vision is wide enough and it captures not just tornado activity, but high winds, rains, flooding, things that'll impact the workforce, things that'll impact patients coming in for care or patients being discharged back home. So, I mean, we've got, the weather plays a bigger role than I think a lot of folks really think about. And if we can reach out and use some of the tools that you guys have, in an intelligent way, I think it gives better forecasting and planning and better outcomes for us as well. And I think people look forward to that. Now, I've done that, and you have to be careful about, like if you're issuing things automatically and fronts are moving in and out of an area, and you can end up, giving people warnings, automatic warnings, a dozen times in a short period of time, and then they become kind of numb to it. But I think the decision support tools in particular and the planning strategies that we're talking about, excellent collaborative things, and the exercises and all, I think will go a long ways towards that. How are you guys addressing the vulnerable populations and reaching out to those folks? We have folks on home oxygen, for instance. There's a power outage that just, they ditch their plan that they're supposed to have worked on and just show up at the hospital, non-emergently, but obviously without oxygen. And so, I know you guys are trying to get information out and help them be better prepared. What's going on that front?
Sure. Well, boy, this is a huge subject, and we're just a small player in this whole thing. We have to use our partners to help us in this endeavor. This is going to be ongoing for years and years and years. This year, we have focused with our initial outreach efforts on Amish populations. And we've also identified all the mobile home parks in our forecast area and are going to look to be increasing outreach materials for those folks. We're going to be spinning up our Spanish language website here in the not too distant future, but honestly, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We have underserved schools. We have those vulnerable populations, and we have to find ways to do the outreach on a large enough scale that we're reaching people. One of the frustrating things, and I'm sure you all have run into this many times over the years, it's folks not being informed and taking personal responsibility for themselves and their families. We can provide all this information, but folks have to have a plan. They have to can't wait to the last minute. Talked to a gentleman one time who had a house with a crawl space, and he installed an above ground tornado shelter, which he had to use when a tornado destroyed his farmstead. So that's a success story, but we have a lot of cases that end up being tragedies. But what are we going to do to help our family, to check on our neighbors, to help expand that web of weather information? For myself, my elderly mom lives in the same town. I call her or text her, and I may send a one-word text to my wife saying basement. So I may be working the event, and she knows what that means. Sometimes rather than head to the basement, she'll go on the back porch and look to see what all the hubbub is
That's
is
the
about.
Midwest. That's because we're all in the Midwest, and we want to.
Absolutely.
We got to visualize that. Yeah, that's.
Yep.
Hey, speaking
Hey,
of basements, I got one thing, Rich. What impressed me when I first got over to one of those workshops at your office, and I'm sure this is true in the new office, you have a safe room right inside your facility. Talk about that a little bit, because I know you guys have been knocked off the air where you had to get in your safe rooms and have somebody else take over that event.
Yes. And these 2023 and 24. So 24 is the most severe thunderstorm and tornado warnings our office has ever issued. And
Ooh.
we still have a little ways to go in the year. 2023 was number 2. I lost track of the number of times in the past 2 years that we had to go into our internal shelter. It's fairly infrequent, but we have a large backup network of other offices. If we think maybe a half an hour ahead of time, this could potentially be a tornado passing fairly close to us, we'll call a backup office. They will already be spun up and ready to take over warning operations. Then we can give them the call, head into our shelter, maybe 5 minutes. The threat the threat passes. Then we're back out to our workstation. So we have a pretty well-oiled machine behind the scenes. Now that doesn't prevent every type of problem, but we do have pretty vigorous backup systems in place. So there is a good plan. Unfortunately, we've had to use it way too many times here in the past couple of years.
Hey, I was just noting the time, and maybe we can go around again and see if there's last comments or points we need to make. And I'll point to our always pointed person, and that'd be Al, for maybe the last one from him.
Yeah, thank you. And Rich, great information. And yeah, we could talk for a long time on this, but you mentioned earlier about weather radios and weather apps. Any last minute guidance or quick thoughts on weather radios? Because a lot of people, I'm not sure, understand the weather radio, or they think it's maybe too complex, and they got to do all these different things to get it working. Weather radios, and then apps. I look at some apps on my phone, and which ones are good, which ones are not. These are free, these are paid, and we all want to stay informed. What's your quick thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, in terms of weather radios, there are many resources online. All you have to do is Google your model. If the instructions are a little bit confusing, use the internet as a resource to get that thing up and running properly. It's the smoke detector of severe weather. Sometimes can be life-saving when other sources fail. In terms of the weather apps, there's many reputable sources of weather out there, probably starting with our broadcast TV partners. Now, most counties have their own app for preparedness and even reporting weather. So just try to focus on reputable, timely sources of weather information.
Awesome. Hey, Mike, anything, do you want to tie in something on Aries too, and the backup plan?
Two things. Yeah. So Rich mentioned earlier about amateur radio and ham radio. I got two things. So I highly encourage emergency managers in the healthcare world to really explore getting an amateur radio license themselves, or at least have in their facility an antenna drop or something like that, where the local amateur radio group could bring somebody in there, hook up. They usually bring their own stuff, but having an antenna hook up maybe to something already on a roof or whatever would really be helpful, because like Rich says, during the derecho, everything's getting knocked out. If you think your cell phone's going to work, you're much mistaken if you've got a widespread sort of destructive storm like that. So, we say in the amateur radio world, when all else fails, you can talk on a ham radio, and that's true. So a few comments on that about weather spotters, and Rich could talk about that if you wanted. But the other thing you just mentioned, Rich, really hits me. In the unfortunately highly charged, and I don't want to get into this, but highly charged political environment we're in right now because of the time of year or whatnot, you mentioned how much storm activity that you've witnessed. Now, this is science, right? This year and last year. And I'd been hearing at your work shops for many years that you saw changes and things were like that. Maybe a quick scientific perspective on what have you seen from a scientific perspective on the changes of our weather patterns?
Sure. Well, first of all, a nod to our spotters. We have a network up to date, all records complete by our wonderful person here, Sandra, who handles all of that. Over 3,500 spotters in our 36 county area. Many of those amateur radio operators. We send out emails before big severe weather events, refreshing the information, and we're getting more reports and quality reports as a result. So we're going to keep going with that very valuable network. In terms of the weather, in this part of the country, human-caused climate change and the research up to this point really focuses on extreme rainfall amounts and the frequency of those occurrences, and we're seeing that with increased major river flooding and incidents of flash flooding. There are a lot of other impacts in terms of severe weather. There are some things going on, but the climate scientists haven't firmly tied those to climate change yet. There are some initial indications that maybe the severe weather season is getting a little bit longer. And maybe tornado outbreaks may be less frequent, but more severe when they do occur. But a lot of that research still ongoing. So again, to recap, the big connector right now, at least in our part of the country, is the increased frequency of flooding, and that has a really strong connection scientifically to climate change.
One quick one, Rich. Do you think Tornado Alley has shifted? That was another one I heard, that there might be a shifting of what considered to be in the mid part of the country what Tornado Alley is, and maybe it's gone a little further north or something like that.
Yes, you look at frequencies of tornadoes, and as you have a warming atmosphere and increased moisture, that's going to result in a change in some patterns. Now, there are some flies in the ointment in terms of statistics and how tornadoes were reported years ago versus how they're reported today, with tons of people out there with cell phones and whatnot. So have to be careful with that. But we are likely going to see some continued shifts in that over time.
Thanks.
Hey, I just wanted, this is maybe a recommendation or so much as a question, and that is one of the vulnerable populations we deal with is the elderly, and we're all joining that group. And I had a conversation with an orthopedic surgeon in our area, and he posed a question. I think it's an excellent one. A lot of the National Weather Service advisories talk about driving and slippery conditions for driving, but don't specifically mention walking and or getting into your vehicle or reminders on that. And the orthopedic surgeon was mentioning that one slip and fall can be a $40,000 to $50,000 expense for an individual, not to mention lifelong pain and suffering. And so maybe one of the audiences that we can reach out to is just adding to the messages about, and I know the slippery conditions can exceed far beyond the severe weather or the acute weather event, but maybe some reminders to folks about being more careful about getting into their cars and not carrying multiple packages. And the insurance companies, I think, would be great in helping out with that messaging. But he had a good point, and I think if that could be carried forward in some of the messaging, it'd be great.
I have that down, Chris. I'm always I'm always
Awesome.
ready for feedback from our partners. So
Awesome.
that's an excellent point.
Awesome. I certainly appreciate our time with with you. Al, anything else?
Well, Rich talked before we started the podcast. He talked a little bit about retiring in the next few years or so, and so don't forget about starting up that podcast talking about Iowa Hawkeyes and all the things. Even though you want to be the voice of the Hawkeyes, you can do a podcast about the Hawkeyes, and believe me, there are tens of thousands of people who would join and jump on to voice their opinion, yay or nay. So, Rich, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you,
I
man.
thoroughly enjoyed it. A pleasure, gentlemen. Have you back anytime. And certainly there's a lot of discussions we can have offline that I think will help move things forward in a positive direction.
Awesome. Hey, Mike usually closes us out with some reminders. Mike.
Yep. Thank you so much, Rich. I think we'll be in touch again. I think you're going to be a regular on this thing. All right. Well, anybody, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Remember, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your inputs, your suggestions. Don't forget our email address, readiness.rewired@gmail.com. And make sure you click that subscribe button up there and ring the bell so that you know when we put up a new video. Give us that thumbs up if you like this kind of content. Thumbs down if you think we suck. But we want to hear from you, and please stop back again.